Hello, everybody. Welcome to our video on accessibility. I am Cody. I'm one of the instructors at LearningFuze Development Bootcamp here in Orange County. Today, I'm here talking to Alicia Evans, who is a prior alumni from LearningFuze and is currently working in development as an accessibility specialist. So before we get into the accessibility side of things, welcome, Alicia. Good to see you.
Thank you. Always good to see you, Cody.
It's been a little bit, but
yeah.
Nice to talk to you again. What got you interested in coding and stuff? Like, how'd you get into this stuff?
That's actually kind of a long story. So I won't start with I was born, but I graduated.
I appreciate that.
I came out of college with a master's degree in creative writing. So kind of the polar opposite of coding, but also not exactly the polar opposite if you think about it.
Yeah,
debatable. And so I ended up moving to New York to work in publishing. Oh. And while I was there working in publishing, I accidentally ended up working in nonprofits and decided, no, I'm going to work in nonprofits now. So those were my first two careers.
With you.
Yeah. And so I worked in nonprofits for about 5 years. And it's really, really rewarding and awesome to work in nonprofits. And I actually still work in a nonprofit. But what ended up happening was, after a lot of personal trauma and secondary trauma and carrying a lot of weight of some of the experiences there, I decided it was time for a career change for me.
Reasonable.
Yeah, fair enough. And so I had a coworker in New York who quit and joined a boot camp to learn coding. And I was so blown away. I just thought it was so cool. I kept asking her questions about it. She was learning Python. She was learning all these things. And I asked her, well, do you think I should do that? And she said no, which was very unexpected. I was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I can't be in your little club, right?
Right, that's funny.
Yeah, but her reasoning for it was, she said, you're a creative person. I don't think you'd get enough from it to enjoy it. And I don't know what your experience has been, Cody, but for me, I think that coding is super creative, especially with web development. Yeah, and it's like a lot of like putting together puzzles, solving mysteries, all kinds of unraveling of things.
It's very technical, but so are many artistic things, right?
Yeah, and I've met
about like painting and stuff. There's like different brushes and different strokes that you can use. Like just because there's a system in place doesn't mean there's not room for creativity.
Exactly. And it depends on, there's lots of different ways that you can bring creativity to your job as a web developer. And my last boss actually also had a master's degree in English. And so he was into poetry. And I was like, I think there's just something about poetry and code, always trying to refine the lines and make them perfect. But so she was wrong is basically the moral of the story.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Definitely wrong.
Can definitely be in code. Of course.
Oh yeah, I think code benefits from creative minds. But so basically I moved back to California. I had decided I was making this career change after a while. Like I was in the process of thinking about it for about a year. And I was trying to get my husband, Brian, who to do a code boot camp because he would be perfect for it. He's had a lot of programming experience. He just doesn't have like the portfolio, and he didn't have as much of the nuts and bolts of like modern day development, I would say.
Right.
He wouldn't agree with that.
He was a hobbyist coder, but he wanted to take it to professional coder.
That's exactly how I'd phrase that. And he's like, well, why don't you do it? And I was like, why don't I do it?
That's the Alicia I love. Yeah, absolutely. Jump for that challenge.
Yeah. So that's how I decided to move from my two previous careers to coding, and I'm still here and I love it. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you in the career, Alicia.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to be here.
The audience listening, Alicia and I have known each other for quite a long time. We're pretty close friends and also fellow developers and stuff. We both came from a background of special needs care way back when. So I'm curious, we talked a lot while you were learning to code about how passionate you were about that field and how passionate I was and how you wanted to do things related to that field. So obviously you came out of the boot camp and you learned development, you knew how to code. How did you take that into getting involved in accessibility, which I know to be such a passion for you?
So it was actually kind of an accident, which is funny because I definitely was, just as you said, very passionate about it. Every time the word accessibility came up, I was like, I have thoughts on this, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so my idea was that I was just going to go to any web development job and I was going to bring with me that passion for accessibility, which I hope that everybody does. Like, I hope that everybody, when you're thinking about how you code, think about how you can code for everyone.
Yeah.
But I didn't go seeking out an accessibility specialist position because I didn't know that that position existed. What happened was I was working at a totally different place. It was just a contract position. Mm-hmm. And when that contract position ended, I started looking for other jobs, and I actually accepted a job, but then got offered to interview for the job that I got next, which was the accessibility specialist job. But I didn't know it was an accessibility specialist job. So my friends were working there. They'd been telling their boss about me and saying that I needed a new job. And so I interviewed there thinking I was interviewing for a Laravel position. Mm-hmm. So I'd done a little studying of Laravel. I was like, yeah, I can do this. This would be fine. And then he said, actually, I think what we want is just like someone to learn about web accessibility because we make a lot of client websites and we don't want those places getting sued because of something we made for them. And I think you can imagine, Cody, my face lit up. I was just like, oh, yeah. Did you know that this is what I devoted my life to? And he didn't, because I didn't even have it on my resume. It was just completely serendipitous.
What a wonderful feeling.
Dream job. Yeah.
I could see your face and reaction in my mind's eye right now. You must have just, like lit up like nobody's business. Yeah.
I was so excited. And so I really got to learn everything I knew about accessibility on the job. And from there, I'm now working at another place where all I do is accessibility. I mean, there I was just doing accessibility work, but now I work with a lot of clients and I teach them about web accessibility, and I help them make their code stronger on their own websites and more inclusive for everybody. So I get to.
Possibly the only thing that I love more than people learning deeply about their passion is learning so deeply that they can help other people learn about it. That's really exciting. That's awesome, yeah. Alicia. I love to hear that journey. I'm really curious, obviously you've developed a lot of expertise on this subject, and this video is of course going to be geared towards people who are considering getting into development. Right. So just as kind of like cursory flyover, we don't need to get too deep into like technical details, but what sort of things do you tend to look out for when you're trying to make sure that a application is accessible?
Well, I'm glad that you specified I shouldn't get in the weeds on this because I can definitely talk for hours.
I'm sure.
But there are a lot of different types of disabilities, right? There's a lot of different people with a lot of different needs when they come to a website. So what I look for is really varied. And there's definitely just so much. You have to consider if someone can't see the page or they have lower vision, mm-hmm. What do I need to make more accessible here? So in terms of images, that's one that people tend to know, I need to add alternative text so that someone who isn't looking at this page or can't see it knows what the image is, right? Or what it's describing or what its purpose is. The same thing for the other way. If someone is deaf or hard of hearing, they need to have captions for things that are audio or conveyed. But then there's also a lot of other things that you need to look for. Like if there's a lot of animations on something, you could make someone physically ill, right? Someone with a vestibular disorder. Yeah. Or someone with ADD might not be able to focus on a form they're filling out if there's like a flashing light or something above saying, hey, look at me, I'm an ad, right? All those very helpful ads. Yeah. So there's just so many things that we look out for. I would say another big one is making sure that everything on your website can be accessed with a keyboard, not just a mouse.
Yeah, that's a big one that I see my students dealing with sometimes. I mean, this is going slightly into the weeds on tech, but there's a property in CSS outline that, happens whenever like you click on a button or things and like a little outline around it. And beginning developers are like, ew, I don't want that. And so they do outline none. And then I come up behind them and I'm like, stop. Like, you can't take away the outlines. That's how people navigate with tab. You know, if you take away the outline, they have no way to know that they're focused on something, you know?
I'm so proud of you, Cody.
I'm here for you. We got
Yeah.
to look out for those people that need a little bit of adaptability, you know?
Exactly. And I use keyboard all the time too. I like the way that it is to navigate the page with the keyboard. It really helps you like get to where you need to be really fast without having to look around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so those kinds of things, having an outline is super important so people know where they are on the page. And it extends beyond just people who need it to people who want it, like me.
I don't know about you, Alicia, but I have subtitles on everything that I ever watch ever, you know?
Yes. I couldn't watch Game of Thrones at all without the subtitle, the captions on, because sometimes I would miss very like either something that had a very thick accent or something that was like such a fantastic name that is like, what did they say?
Gets a little out there. So like a lot of accessibility is not only for, you know, people with disabilities who absolutely need it, it's also to make sure that your website is adaptable to people who might want to experience it in different ways.
Oh, totally. And you get so many more customers or students or whatever it is that your business is, you know, whoever your business is working with, you get more of them when you increase these accessibility features. Like if I'm scrolling through social media, don't tell anyone I scroll on social media, but if I'm doing that and I'm looking at a video and that video doesn't have captions, I'll scroll right past because I'm not going to listen to a video when I'm in the middle of something else. Absolutely. But I will kind of absent-mindedly read it, you know? So
yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I didn't even really think about that, but that is like, I mean, a lot of people scroll through the internet on mute, you know, like you can't just have your phone blaring in public. So these audible, you know, accessibility standards we reach for also have probably pretty wide swath applicability to people who just use the internet silently.
Yeah.
You know? Very interesting. So, okay, based on all this stuff, Alicia, I do have one other like follow-up question on this, which is like, obviously accessibility is an evolving field. I mean, our awareness of, you know, mental health and physical ability is always growing, and we find new avenues to help people out, to make sure that, you know, we're being inclusive of everybody. And I always tell my students, you know, the world is the internet now. Like none of us could probably reasonably imagine a world without the World Wide Web at this point. And so because of that, it's like integral to our day-to-day life, which makes it not just a nice thing to do, but essentially mandatory to make it accessible to everybody, because everybody from all walks of life deserves to be able to use the internet. So given all of that, do you, in your experience so far, see any areas that accessibility is reaching towards fixing, but maybe hasn't necessarily mastered yet, or things that you see that need to have more attention put on?
I mean, unfortunately, we're still at bare basics territory. You know, I think it's a huge percentage of websites are not accessible for people with disabilities, even though it's the law, even though we have all of these things in place, even though our web content accessibility guidelines, the standards for accessibility have been around for like 20 years now, we're still not caught up. So before jumping into the cutting edge of things, I would really want everyone to focus on what can I do right now on my own website. Yeah, and just speaking of, you know, like people doing everything from home and from the web, 2020, 2021, everyone was doing stuff from the web. And if say your grocery store or Instacart or whatever wasn't accessible, that means somebody's got to go into their house or go out of their house, go into a potentially dangerous environment. And that's not an equal experience for people. It's not safe, and there need to be these kinds of accommodations. And I think that these 2 years, oh my God, have really laid bare the need for these kinds of things. So, so definitely number one, just get your websites accessible.
I think that's a great starting point. And you know, obviously, like you said, there's so many people that are lagging behind on this, you know? I mean, professional developers know that the development world advances quickly, but the corporate world does not, you know? And there's a lot of companies that kind of drag their feet on updating their technologies because what's the immediate gain? we're looking at 6 months development cycle with essentially the same product. But I think you would probably agree with me. It's important to view accessibility revisions to websites as not something where we're seeking to gain. We're making sure that our product is a good product that is accepting of all people. And if you're looking for a gain, the gain is that people that are in need of accessibility adjustments to websites can now use your product.
But let's not even leave it there. There's so much money to be made in accessible websites too. Like, because 90-something% of the web is inaccessible. If you have an accessible website, the quarter of the population with a disability, right, is going to come and use your website. I think that the market of people with disabilities is comparable to like the population of China. And people are always talking about like, how do we get money or how do we get users in China, but they're never talking about how do we get users with disabilities who have a lot of disposable income, who want to buy things, why not prioritize them? And so it not only protects you from potential litigation, it really lets you improve your brand, because you're now saying like, we're a company who cares about everyone having access to these important things. And you're saying, like, welcome to everybody. And that word of mouth is fast and people will come. Like, if you build it, they will come.
They will. Field of Dreams was right. It's funny that you bring that up, because I've seen people online that like represent themselves on like Twitter and YouTube and Twitch, people that have disabilities of some form and will review websites and things like that for accessibility. And I've seen videos of people that have gotten legitimately teary-eyed because they open a website and it's actually accessible, and that's the feeling that I think we as a tech culture should be reaching towards. These people have often been left out in the cold for experiences that the more able-bodied are able to just jump into. And if we can really shift our focus as a collective towards making sure that everybody can participate, I think that the internet as a whole becomes better. That's super cool. Alicia, this has been so much fun to chat with you about. Throw me down.
It has been. I have one caveat, because you did ask me about the cutting edge of accessibility. And I want to say that right now people think that the cutting edge of accessibility is accessibility overlays. There's been lots and lots of money poured into these as like your one solution to making your website accessible. And what I have seen, and from people who I know who have experienced it and what I've seen on Twitter and everywhere else, is that it can actually make things harder to use for screen reader users than doing nothing. So companies, well-meaning companies, are spending a lot of money per month for this, one-click fix solution that ends up making things harder and worse for them, and still opens them up for litigation. They're not going to sue the overlay, they're going to sue you. So, so that's my caveat. I think there's a lot of room for AI and for development in that way, and for tools. But at least where we are right now, it doesn't cut it. So that's my word of warning.
So it sounds like, we really should be moving less towards trying to create adaptive layers on top of the website and shift more towards just making sure that the core product itself is accessible.
Right. Like, you wouldn't build a building and then try to add an elevator after the fact.
I would hope not.
It would be a lot more expensive. It'd be messy. It would ruin your design, everything else. So definitely, when you're going to build your building, think about your elevator.
When you're going to build your website, think about accessibility first.
Think about accessibility right when you're starting to design it, right when you have the idea. So
love that. I have one last question for you, Alicia.
Yes.
I hope you don't mind. Obviously, I can talk to you about accessibility forever,
I know,
but I have students that want to learn, so I have to go back to them soon.
That's okay.
Speaking of students, my final question is, I got to see your journey into development and how hard you worked to get into coding, and obviously you were successful. So I have many people that are looking to get into development all the time, coming through LearningFuze. Do you have any tips that you can leave them with on how to best make their way into development?
Yes. So I clearly had a lot of success with LearningFuze. That's a plug for LearningFuze. One of the things that really sold me on LearningFuze was lots of other boot camps will try to teach you like 5 different stacks and you'll go a mile wide, but an inch deep. At LearningFuze, we're only covering, an inch, but we're going a mile deep.
Right.
So you'll really understand the core concepts of web development and you'll be able to use those to learn anything afterward, which I've 100% known to be the case. I got jobs doing .NET. I got jobs doing, like I said, Laravel, WordPress, anything, because I showed that I could learn those things and I could. And so that's definitely, it's a good approach that you guys are doing over there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think so, because that's something that we hammer all the time, is that we're not just trying to learn technologies, we're trying to learn how to learn technologies.
Exactly, and that'll take you so far.
Oh yeah.
In terms of the boot camp itself, like once you're in it, here's what I've got for you. think of your classmates as your friends, not your competitors. So definitely ride everyone else's coattails. Think, oh, like this is my friend. We're going to help each other find jobs. I've gotten people jobs from my boot camp. Other people have gotten me their jobs, and we all collaborate, and we also had so much fun while we were there together. And I now have lots of great friends that I wouldn't otherwise have had. So like that's great. I've been in people's weddings, like we're all we're all happy together.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great thing to point out, because a lot of people worry about like, oh, I have to compete with all these people in the job market. But then, the job market is constantly growing. There's new jobs out there. There's always opportunities, and you get a lot more bees with honey than vinegar, as they say, and you want to try and build your network with good interactivity with other people.
Yeah, and I never once found myself like interviewing for the same job as someone else. And I don't know how that is, because it seems like you would, but never. Like it was like we all had our own opportunities and we all went forward with them. And we were pretty successful. So
yeah, I mean, obviously you're in the field, so you did something right.
Totally worked out. Do you have time for me to go through a few more?
Yeah, give me a couple more. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is you're spending a lot of money. You're probably quit your job. You've got this idea that this has to work, so you got to put in the hours. Like you just have to. Like we were not there only during class hours. We were there 10 hours a day on weekdays. We did another 8 on Saturdays. And we just like got as much as we could out of it. We pulled instructors to the side and asked them questions. We asked as many like questions that maybe we were afraid to ask as possible, because we were getting our money's worth out of this program.
Yeah. I tell my students that all the time. They'll be like, Cody, I'm sorry for asking so many questions. I'm like, that's literally what you paid for. Don't worry about it, Yes,
exactly. You get your money's worth. I would also say that I put a lot of energy into my portfolio. I worked on it for 6 weeks. I built projects from scratch. I tried to set myself apart, and people loved my portfolio. When I did interviews, they were always like, this is great, this is great, this is great. I also made sure that the projects in my portfolio reflected me. They weren't just generic. So I had something in there about like basically after Dungeons and Dragons, because I'm a huge nerd. And people talk to me about being huge nerds in my interview. I had an app that helped people find free meals in Orange County. And so like that also is something, like I used to work at a homeless shelter before coming here. So that's something that shows, who I am, the kinds of values I have. And that is also something that we talked about when I got started. And then I did like an augmented reality thing that was just cool, and people like
that. It was a really cool project, I gotta say. But yeah, I think that's a really good tip, is that the development world is a wide place, and it's really important that if you want to establish yourself, you have to create your own identity. Allow who you are and your journey to this point to become a part of your work.
Yes, and on that same vein, when you're doing interviews, don't try to be like the perfect, web developer. Just try to show them who you are and how cool it would be to work with you.
Yeah, be yourself. If you're not yourself in the interview process, then somebody gets a rude surprise at some point,
Well, or pleasant surprise, but they would never know. They would never know how, like if you, Cody, if you came into my interview and you were just like, I know these things in programming and we're dead faced, like I wouldn't know how fun it would be to work with you, and I might not hire you, and I'd miss that great opportunity to like work together. Yeah.
Well, pretty cool.
So yeah, just showcase yourself. Don't be nervous. Don't try to be everyone else. Just like let people know who you are and let them take it or leave it.
Those are fantastic tips.
Thank you. I have more, but I'm going to let you go because those are the important ones.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I would love to stick around and talk more. Maybe we could do it again sometime, but yeah, I've got to go and talk about doing proper layout design in CSS right now. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. That
does sound really fun. Okay, right? Good luck. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for joining me. And those of you who are listening from home, thank you for listening. Hopefully I get a chance to chat with you guys again soon. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.